Hi, and welcome back to Investment Banking University's Front Office Investment Banking Process course. Again, go ahead to investmentbankingu.com, register for the course. We're now talking about the final step in the front office investment banking process, which is known as the M&A process. So we're going to start out with the table of contents. Once again, we always start out by talking about the front office investment banking process as a whole to get an understanding of where we're at in relation to that process. So then we're going to go into why the M&A process in the first place, talking about the actual process itself, and then going into the sub-steps, which is IOI from the buyer, buyer-seller meeting, purchase agreement given to seller, signed purchase agreement with different terms, entering due diligence, completing due diligence, and closing and flow of funds. So the first is the front office investment banking process, once again, goes from coverage to mandate target matching, origination, fee structuring and winning the mandate, underwriting, packaging, buyer list creation, deal structuring, and the M&A process. So why the M&A process? Well, since M&A is in fact the primary product of the investment banker, what we're ultimately trying to sell here, it's important to have an understanding of the M&A process because this is what we're actually going to be running as an investment banker or M&A professional. So the M&A process may be different at different deal sizes, whether you're dealing with SMBs in the lower middle market, or you're in the middle market, or you're dealing with more large cap type stuff. It's obviously going to affect the entire process, but we're primarily going to be talking about an M&A advisor or an investment banker in the lower middle market to middle market, those sort of processes. So the M&A process is IOI from the buyer, buyer-seller meeting, purchase agreement given to seller, signed purchase agreement with different terms, entering due diligence, completing due diligence, and then closing and flow of funds. So first off, when we're talking about an IOI from the buyer, we are talking in relation to reviewing the teaser and summary financials. The buyer then notifies you that they're interested in purchasing the company in the form of an actual written IOI. This will be sent to the M&A advisor or investment banker, which takes them to the next step of actually arranging a buyer-seller meeting. So after submitting the IOI, you will then arrange an in-person meeting with the seller, which is called a buyer-seller meeting. If the buyer is unavailable or there's distance or timing issues, a phone call can in fact be set up. After that, we're talking about a purchase agreement given to the seller. So after that buyer-seller meeting takes place, you can then prompt the buyer to submit a purchase agreement and then give this purchase agreement to the seller, and you'll be able to review that as well, some of the different deal points, the consideration. So in terms of the next step, the signed purchase agreement with different terms, after the seller reviews the purchase agreement, they will either sign the contract or counter with different terms. They are to sign the contract with contingencies written into the contract so that it can be executed upon. When we enter due diligence, after receiving the counter, the buyer can sign the agreement that makes it a legally binding purchase agreement contingent on the items that will now be explored during the due diligence period. As items are explored, the buyer signs off that the items are no longer in question one by one. Now that we're moving towards completing due diligence, after all items in due diligence list are completed, due diligence is now completed and the closing can be scheduled. The documents are sent to the closing agent with instructions as to the M&A fee as well. And we really want to make sure that our M&A fee is going to be on the flow of funds here, and we'll talk about that in a second. So now we're on the final step, closing and flow of funds. After both the buyer and seller sign at the closing, the checks are cut, and you receive your M&A or investment banking fee, and you're able to cash that. You need to make sure that you are actually involved in the flow of funds, and that may directly be transferred to you, and the flow of funds document should be in there to ensure that you're getting paid. So once again, this has been the M&A process, just at a very high level, talking about some of the steps that occur in the lower middle market, middle market. And this is, of course, a part of the broader front office investment banking process as taught by Investment Banking University. So go ahead and go to investmentbankingu.com, register for the course. Thanks for your time.